There are women who move through the landscape of modern love carrying a very quiet grief, one that often they can't fully explain to the world around them. It's not simply heartbreak or even disappointment, and it's not the generalized frustration of the dating culture. It's something much deeper, because beneath the surface of their relationships, beneath the language of attachment styles and emotional availability, these women remember another architecture of union entirely. Their nervous system remembers sacred reciprocity. And because of that, they can't normalize emotional asymmetry, no matter how hard they try. Many of these women spend years attempting to adapt themselves to modern relational culture. They tell themselves they're too sensitive, too deep, too idealistic, too intense. They try to become less emotionally attuned, less aware, less devoted. They attempt to convince themselves that good enough should feel sufficient in a relationship. But something inside them continues resisting. Because the issue isn't preference, it's architecture. The soul recognizes incoherence the way the body recognizes a toxin, and what others can casually survive for decades slowly starves these type of women. These women are often the ones who become the emotional stabilizers in relationships. They're women who sense everything before it's spoken, the women who carry the tension in the room, who regulate the atmosphere, who soften conflict naturally, who hold emotional complexity with ease. And they quietly overfunction in the hope that love can return to harmony again. And this isn't weakness, it's adaptation. Through time, these women become exquisitely attuned to imbalance, and many of them were born into ancestral lineages where feminine love became fused with emotional labor, where devotion meant endurance, where women learned to carry entire emotional worlds while receiving very little true reciprocity in return. And over time, they became deeply adaptive. But adaptation isn't the same thing as inner coherence. And eventually the nervous system begins to revolt against relationships that require self-erasure in order to survive. This is where many feminine initiates find themselves now, at a threshold, no longer able to fully tolerate fragmented love, but not yet fully anchored in the other reality, the reality of embodied unity. And this creates a confusion inside because the culture often pathologizes what is actually sacred intelligence. Women who long for depth are told they're unrealistic. Women who desire devotion are told they're dependent. Women who can't tolerate emotional inconsistency are told they simply need better boundaries. But beneath all of this is a much deeper truth. Some women aren't longing for fantasy, they're remembering mirrored coherence. The feminine body remembers when love was not built upon chronic emotional instability. It remembers when polarity was sacred rather than performative. It remembers when masculine presence created safety instead of confusion. It remembers when devotion moved in both directions. And because this memory still exists within the body, modern fragmentation often feels unbearable to certain women at a soul level. This is why many deeply conscious women continue trying to negotiate with their own knowing. They remain inside relationships where the mind can rationalize compatibility, while the nervous system quietly collapses beneath the weight of emotional asymmetry. Because the body always knows first. The body recognizes collapse before the mind creates a language for it. It feels the inconsistency, the absence of grounded leadership, the subtle instability beneath the words, inability of the masculine structure to truly hold polarity. And over time, the feminine psyche begins experiencing profound exhaustion. Not simply because she's giving too much, but because she's attempting to create sacred reciprocity alone. And this is impossible. Sacred union can't be carried by one nervous system. It emerges through mutual coherence, through reciprocity, through presence, through embodied polarity, through devotion that moves in both directions. This is why the women who remember sacred reciprocity are not merely navigating personal relationship struggles. They're carrying part of a collective restoration process. Their refusal to normalize fragmentation isn't dysfunction, it's signal. The Rose lineage has always understood that love is not merely personal fulfillment, it's a collective architecture. The quality of union between masculine and feminine shapes entire emotional fields, family systems, ancestral lines, and future generations. And perhaps this is why certain women feel such profound grief within modern relational culture. Because they're not simply grieving failed relationships, they're grieving the collapse of sacred relational coherence itself. But they're also remembering it, and that remembrance matters. Because the women who remember sacred reciprocity aren't here to become smaller in order to survive fragmentation more comfortably. They're here to help restore another possibility entirely. A form of love built not on performance or survival or even emotional management of others, but on coherence, met coherence, upon mutual devotion and reciprocity, upon the sacred architecture that the soul has never truly forgotten.